most important or the necessary step which is embedded in the scientific research process. As a student, if we talk about, it is not only necessary for the graduation, but as a faculty, as a academician, it is also important for our career progression. We all know that. Like during our different stages of promotions, like starting from assistant professor to confirmation, and then to the associate professor, and then further to professor. All of our institutes, they have set certain set of guidelines where they want us to meet certain criteria in terms of number of publications which we have to publish in definite period of time. So it is not only important for the student, but it is also important for the researcher as well, professors as well. Now the question is what to publish and what not to publish. You need to understand as a scientist like me, what kind of data, what kind of research is publishable, and what kind of data you cannot publish or should not publish. So any results or methodology which you have developed in your lab, if it is new and original, that is something which can be published. So novelty is one of the most important aspect of any type of publication. So that's why whenever we start our journey as a researcher, we were always being told about the novelty aspect, that if your work is not novel, then you cannot publish it. So novelty is the first priority. That means this kind of work was never published by anybody else all over the world. Then that is mostly a kind of, is a research article. Then other than research article, you can also publish the review articles. That can be a illustrative review, like narrative reviews, or it can be a mini review, which is kind of short publication. We'll talk about these things in the coming, slides. And then the data which, or the work which advances the knowledge and understanding in a certain scientific way, those kind of work should also be published. The work which does not have any scientific value, or the work which is like out of dated, or if somebody is doing a duplication of the previously published work, or the findings or the conclusions are incorrect or unacceptable, that kind of data cannot be published. Now the most important thing is that if you have a negative data, for example, you have done some research, for example, if I talk about the drug discovery, because I'm working in the pharmaceutical department, so here we deal with the screening of different molecules against certain disease conditions like diabetes, pain, Alzheimer's, cancer, all these diseases. We test different molecules for their safety and efficacy. We want to understand whether these molecules can treat the diabetes or cancer or not. At the same time, these molecules should not produce any side effects and toxicities. But the most important thing is that if that molecule doesn't show any efficacy, which means the molecule doesn't show any activity against diabetic model, or doesn't show anti-diabetic activity, you can say. In that case, whether that kind of data is publishable or not. So there are very few journals, let me tell you, like maybe hardly one or two, like Journal of Negative Findings, which accept the negative findings. The reason is that, whenever you are getting the expected data, that means everything has worked out, starting from your hypothesis to methodology to experimental design, everything has worked out as expected, as you have hypothesized in the beginning. But if you're getting the negative findings, that there could be 100 reasons for that negative result. So the very first and the obvious reason is that that experiment, is working in that way only, right? So whatever data you're getting is genuine, true, right? And the drug may not have any activity if I talk about drug discovery, right? But there could be other reasons where person is adopting the wrong methodology, or they are not using the right tools, or they have done some serious errors and mistakes while doing that project. So there could be a number of reasons which can lead to the failure of the experiments or sometimes negative finding. So that's why it's very difficult to get the negative data published. Overall, if we talk about, like publication all over the world, any scientific community, they need a good manuscript at the end of the day to present your contribution. Now the questions, which you need to answer before you write, you need to ask yourself, like why you want to publish your work. So the very first question you need to ask about the novelty of your work, whether it is new and interesting, If it is a current hot topic, like an area in which people are currently interested, you don't want to publish something, or it will be difficult for you to publish something, which is not current, which is not, you can say, hot, like in terms of technology or the area which people are not exploring right now. So for example, if I talk about right now, AI, machine learning, right, data analytics, or if I talk about drug discovery, then different diseases like, which are very much prevalent. Recently, we have struggled with the COVID-19, like 2 years back. So if somebody is working in those areas which are current and hot, then chances of getting the good publication is high. But if you're working on some problems for which solutions are already there, or the problems are not that much relevant to the society, in that case, it is very difficult to publish that kind of work. Now, the next question which you need to ask yourself as a researcher, whether you are able to provide the solution to some novel and the difficult problems. And then at the end, you need to ask yourself whether you are ready to publish at this point or not. If you are able to answer yes to all of these questions, that means you can start preparing your manuscript for publication. So what you see here on the left hand side, on the yellow highlights, it's about the work which is actually not ready. And this kind of work has no scientific interest. Like, as I already told you, the outdated work, the work which is duplication of the previously published work, or the work with the incorrect conclusions. This kind of data cannot be published, and that's why they're not ready to publish. Although, if your results or methodology are new or original, and if they are leading to significant enhancement in a particular field, or you are providing a up-to-date review of a particular subject, which can help in advancing a certain field, that means your work is ready to publish, and you should go ahead with the manuscript writing. Now, the question is, what makes a strong manuscript? So, there are 3 key elements which you need to understand before you, even start writing a manuscript. So, any strong manuscript, should have a very clear, useful, and the exciting message. The second element or the second condition for a strong manuscript is that the results, are supposed to be proposed or presented or constructed in a very logical manner, which will allow editors to easily grasp the significance. So manuscript is to be written in such a way so that even a layman means a person who doesn't belong to your particular area. For example, you are working in the field of literature or somebody is working in the field of mathematics. So if you are writing your manuscript, you should write it in such a manner so that even if a layman read your paper, they should be able to understand the basic concepts embedded in your manuscript. And ultimately, the editors, reviewers, and the readers, they all want to receive a well-presented manuscript. Now, what are the different types of manuscript which you can write or your students can write? So the first category of manuscript is the full-length articles. So these articles are generally known as original articles, or you can also call them the research articles, and they're the most important papers. And they're often, basically consist of the research data, and which is often compiled, in the form of research publication. And then the next category of article is the letters or the rapid communication. You can also call them short communication. So in the scientific community, it is very, very important to publish your work. If you don't publish your work timely, then it might happen that, your competitor in other part of the world, not even in your country, they might also be working on the same problem with the same tools. So if they publish before you, then what will happen? You will lose the novelty of your work. So sometimes people, try to publish as soon as possible. You don't have a lot of data. If you have just, just some of the key data, you can publish it in a form of short communication, so that to make sure that no one else publish before you. And then the next category of article is the review article or the perspective. So these are the kind of articles which are generally written by the experts. But these days it is very, very common, everybody is, writing the review articles. Sometimes they don't have the facilities to carry out the research work. So they're mostly focusing on the review articles. But if you look at the, the journal norms, they are generally invited by the editors from the reputed journal. They ask, people who are working in that particular field from last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, they invite them to write the narrative review or the illustrative review, or you can say the perspective articles. In this review article, the authors are supposed to write the summary of the recent development on a specific topic and highlight the previously published, reports. And the most important thing is that this is not the place to introduce a new information. That means here we are not supposed to talk about the research finding basically, right? So it's mostly about the data which has already been, generated by other labs all over the world, and you are just putting those piece of, information from different research articles and then compiling it in a form of review. Now, the most important thing is that many times, we do understand the importance of novelty in research articles, but we never pay attention to the novelty in the review article. And even when I was doing my postdoc, when I was in Johns Hopkins in 2012-13, I was working on a very important project where we are supposed to screen one molecule, which was a glial cell inhibitor for the treatment of neuropathic pain. That is my area of research. So the pain which is because of the injury in the nerves. Some people call it sciatica as well. So it is due to the injury in the sciatic nerve and sometimes due to compression in the spinal cord. So that molecule was an inhibitor of some of the cells which are involved in the this neuroinflammation and other processes similarly. So but what happened, that molecule unfortunately didn't work out, and I read a lot of literature during that period. Then I thought, I have already worked so hard in doing this project and the findings were not positive, so it is very obvious that we could not publish that research article. Then I proposed to my postdoc supervisor that I want to compile the information which I was reading from last 2-3 months in the form of a review article. So the very first question he asked me, what is the novelty in your review article? And I was not expecting my postdoc supervisor to ask me that question, because I never thought about the novelty in the review article, because this is not what I have been told in my PhD. In my PhD, I have always been told about the novelty in the research, but never in the review. But then, because I had a very strong, I would say, knowledge about that area, because I was reading that thoroughly from last 2-3 months, I was able to finally convince him, suggesting him, this kind of information was not published by anybody else, because glial cell plays both the roles, like protective role and the destructive role as well in the neuropathic pain. And nobody has talked about it actually so far, but there was certain research which has been done and suggests that glia may work in both ways depending upon so many factors. So I wanted to compile a review based on that information. So finally he was convinced and he allowed me to write that review article, which we were able to publish in a very good journal at that time. So it was like about more than 10 impact factors, and then Neuroscience and biobehavioral reviews. So it's very important when you are teaching the student, it's very important to understand, to teach them that they're not supposed to write something, in the form of review, which has already been written by someone else. So if there's no review published in that area in the last 5 years, then probably there is a lot of research which is happening around, and your students can compile it in the form of a review article. But if somebody has already published in the last year or in the current year regarding the same content, then it is just a duplication of the previously published work, and that should be avoided. Next is self-evaluate your work. So if you think that your data, your work is good enough to publish in a form of full-length article, or you think that your results are so thrilling as a researcher, if you are excited about your study, about your project, and you feel that your results are really thrilling, then you can go ahead and then decide whether you want to publish it or not. Sometimes it is very important to take the advice from your supervisor or from your colleagues. Sometimes it is very easy to find the mistake in the work of others, but when we are reviewing our own work, then we don't see any mistake in that. So it is very true that outsiders can see the things more clearly than us. So it is always good to share your manuscript or data with your colleagues, with your supervisor, and ask their opinion whether you should go ahead with the manuscript writing or not. Now, next is, if you want to move forward once you have written your manuscript, the next question is that how to find out the right journal for your manuscript. So the very first point to understand what kind of journal you can target for your manuscript is by looking at the references at the end of your publication. So those references, you can see where they are published, and then you can note down some of the, I would say, most potential journals from the list of references, starting from the high impact to low impact. Although I don't always support this impact factor game, but sometimes it becomes important. If the journal is peer reviewed, it is cited by many people around the world, then the citation of the journal will be high, and that may be the most reputed journal. So everybody want to go for the most reputed journal. So you can look at the references and then make the priority list for your article, for your publication. And also, when you have identified the journal, then you can review the recently published article in those journals, and then find out whether your work is matching to their to them or not. You can also read guide to authors. When you go to the web page of any journal, you can go to guide to authors. In guide to authors, it is written what kind of work they are interested in, journal, and based on that you can identify whether they will consider your publication or not. Also, before deciding the journal for your publication, these are some of the key questions which you need to ask yourself. The first is whether the journal is peer reviewed or not. Now, what is the basically meaning of peer reviewed? Peer reviewed means whether the articles which are submitted in that journal, they are being sent out for review by good scientists all over the world. So you can also see the categorization of a journal not only based on impact factor, but also based on their quartile, like Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. So the top 20-25% journals are considered as a Q1 journal. Below that, we go for Q3, Q2, Q3, Q and Q4. So based on that, you can decide whether this particular journal is peer review or not. Now, the next important question you need to see, who is the audience for their journal. If you're working in the field of, for example, neuroscience, then you are not supposed to communicate your field in the work in the field of electrical engineering or in the journal which is of electrical engineering or the environmental engineering, right? You want to submit your work in a journal which is dealing with the neuroscience stuff in terms of publications. Now, the next important question you need to ask yourself is, what is the average time to print? So you have already spent 2, 3, or 4 years in collecting the data, carrying out the experiments, repeating the studies, and then you want to publish your work as soon as possible. So you cannot wait for 1 year for journal to decide whether this work can be published or not. And most importantly, if journal reject your work after 6 months, then all this time will be wasted. So as a scientist, you can always go to the web page of the journal and read the guide to authors. In the guide to authors and also on their front page, they are generally giving the time to first decision. Time to first decision means the day when you submit your manuscript to any journal, they will tell you whether they take 1 week or 5 days or 2 weeks to respond to that first submission in terms of sending it out for review or rejecting the manuscript. So the journals which are very proactive in responding to the article, they are generally considered as a good journal. Okay. And the journal's impact factor, as I told you, I'm not very fond of impact factors, but yes, this is one kind of matrix which has become very, very important in the field of scientific so more is the impact factor, the journal is considered more peer reviewed, and the impact factor is generally calculated on the basis of the number of citations which that particular journal has received in the previous year. So, and then once you are, are able to answer all these questions, then you can decide on one journal from the list of that journal. And then most importantly, do not submit your manuscript in multiple journals. Many times people do this mistake, because we have spent a lot of time in carrying out this work, many years. It's a hard work. And now you want to graduate soon, especially as a student. And you don't want to wait for like 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And then you just want to communicate your work as soon as possible and get it published. So this is a mistake people do. They submit in multiple journals. But this is highly unethical and immoral behavior. Sometimes journals do notice these kind of things and they can completely ban the supervisor, and they may even contact your institute regarding this kind of fraud. So always avoid submitting your manuscript to multiple journals at the same time. Yeah, but once you hear from the journal regarding the rejection of your work or any kind of news, then you can go ahead for the communication in the another journal. But before that, it is not appreciated. Now, these are some of the online tools which are available with the publishing houses to find out the right journal for your work. So you can see that, they have the keyword option. You can just type the keyword. For example, if I'm working in the field of neuroscience, I will type the neuroscience, and then if it is pain related work, I will put a comma or hyphen and then type the pain, and then I will do the search. Click the search option. After searching option, there will be a lot of articles will be open in different journals. So that is one way. So the another way is to you can directly search by the name of the journal name. And another way of finding the right journal is that you can copy paste your abstract, on the journal web page, on that search engine web page, and then based on the abstract, it also uses some kind of AI. It will tell you, okay, these are the list of journals which matches with your work. Now, as I told you in the beginning, any good manuscript, should be written properly, and the language should be very clear, useful, and the scientific message should be very exciting and clear. Now, if I tell you that manuscript writing, it's just like writing a movie or making a movie. So there are different characters in the movies, right? Starting from the beginning, like there's male actor, female actress, right? And then villain, and then there are a lot of other actors, right? So they are playing their role in a very systematic manner, right? And the story is moving, one after the other in a very connected mode. The manuscript is also supposed to be written in the similar manner. If you, suddenly get some kind of paragraphs which are not connected with the previous paragraphs, that means there will be a huge disconnect, and the audience will feel, like lost when they're going through your manuscript, when they're reading your manuscript. So it has to be written in a very flowful manner, logical manner, so that audience can feel connected throughout the duration of while they're reading your manuscript. The most important thing is the formatting. So if the formatting is done in a proper manner, then again, that is another strength of the manuscript, good manuscript. And then the writing style, as I mentioned, it has to be really good so that you are able to transmit the outcome of your study in a more effective manner. Now, if we talk about the different components of the manuscript, then whether it is a research article or review article, but mostly if I talk about the research article, so the first part is the character or the introduction, basically. In the introduction, you are supposed to have different, I would say hidden things like research topic on which you have carried out the work. Then you try to set up the node of the, by citing the reason to carry out that work, rational, you highlight the rational, and then you talk about the problem, like the problem which you have picked in your project. And then you will also talk about the possible existing solution, and then how your solution is different from the existing solution. And then in material and methods, there's nothing new that we already know. That whatever tools or technique you have used to answer your questions, those details are supposed to come under the materials and methods. And then comes the result section, and then followed by the discussion. We'll talk about that. So the very first part, even before the introduction, the very first thing is the title of the manuscript. Okay, followed by abstract, then keywords, and then introduction, methodology, result, discussion, as I told you, followed by conclusion, acknowledgement, and then references and supporting information. So if we talk about the effective manuscript title, many times we don't pay much attention to the title part, and we feel that it is okay to put any generalized title, but that is not true. It is the face of your manuscript, and your title should be able to identify the main issue of the paper, or the idea of the paper, we can say, for which we have carried out this study, right? And most importantly, it should be concise. What does it mean? The title should not be too long or too less. But at the same time, the title is supposed to be accurate, unambiguous, specific, and complete. That you need to pay attention while you are drafting the title for your manuscript. Also, it should use a professional language, and we should avoid the rarely used abbreviation. It's very important that the title of the manuscript should not have any kind of abbreviations that can come in the introduction part or other parts of the manuscript with full forms in the first time, and then later on you can write the abbreviation consistently in the manuscript. Then the title should be such that it should be short and catchy, so that it can attract the reader. So your citations will depend on the title itself. If the title is not attractive, nobody is going to pay attention to your work on PubMed. So the title has to be really catchy. So these are some of the examples of manuscript titles. For example, action of antibiotics on bacteria. This is one way of writing the title. And on the other hand, another person has written inhibition of growth of Mycobacterium tuberculosis by streptomycin. Now, can you see the difference? In the left hand side, they're just talking in a very generalized, in a very short, way. But the title should not be too long or too short. The title which is mentioned here is very short. So it is not clear from this title which kind of microbes they are targeting, what medicine they are using, and whether the effect is inhibitory or excitatory. But if you look at this title, it is very, very clear that they are trying to inhibit the growth of Mycobacterium tuberculosis by the drug streptomycin. So the title has to be really, little bit elaborative. So rest are the other examples of the bad and the good title. On the left hand side, these are the bad titles. On the right hand side, these are the good titles. So it should not be too short or too long. It has to be short and catchy so that people can use it for citation. Now, the next important component of any manuscript is the keyword. So how do you find the articles for your research? Simply by typing the keywords in the PubMed. For example, if I talk about like neuroscience and pain research, the very first keywords I put on PubMed is the neuroscience, oblique or hyphen or pain. So whatever work is being done in that area will pop up in my window, and then I can select or deselect the articles from that window. And also, they are the label, as I mentioned, these are the labels of the manuscript, right? And they're also used by indexing and abstracting surveys. And they have to be really specific. You cannot write the keyword which is not related to your research. So it has to be specific in that way. And in the keyword, you are supposed to use only established abbreviations. For example, DNA, which is deoxyribonucleic acid. So only these kind of established abbreviations are allowed to use in the title, not the smaller one. Now here, if you look at this title, on the left hand side, blade wake interaction in cross flow turbines. What could be the possible keywords for this article? Very simple. So the very first keyword is a cross flow turbine. Second is the vertical axis turbine. Then H rotor. So for that you need to know what are the different components of that equipment, and then based on that you can write down the other keywords as well, including mechanism. And also you can check the guideline given in the journal web page, which are known as guide to authors, for any specific guideline on the keywords. Most of the journal they ask only for 4 to 5 keywords, not more than that, due to space limitations. Now next comes the abstract part. In the abstract part, one is supposed to write it in a very concise manner. So abstract is, you can say, is a kind of gist of your work which you have carried out, whether it is a research article or whether it is a review article. And now different journals have different guidelines again. Some journals, they prefer the structured abstract. So what do you mean by structured abstract? They will ask you to write down 1 to 2 sentences. So while writing the abstract, this is very, very important to follow the rule of 10. It's very important. What is this rule of 10? So initial 1 to 2 sentences, whether it is a unstructured abstract or the structured abstract, starting 1 to 2 sentences should talk about the aim. Next 2 to 3 sentences will be talking about the materials and methods. And then afterwards, next 2 to 3 sentences will be about your findings, which you have observed in that particular study. And then the last 2 sentences will purely be talking about the discussion or conclusion based on your finding. So these 10 sentences, can make a good abstract, because it will not be too lengthy or too short as well. And in the abstract, you can summarize the problem, as I mentioned. In the you can mention it in the aim, and then you also summarize the methods, your results, and the conclusion. Okay. And what do you mean by structured and unstructured abstract? Structured abstract means these are the different subheadings like aim, material and methods, result, discussion. So some journals has very clear guidelines. They want you to write your abstract in the structured form, in the different subheadings. But some journals, they ask for the unstructured abstract, which means they want you to write the abstract in the form of paragraph, one single paragraph. So there also you can follow the same rule of 10. But in that case, the subheadings will be missing. And make sure it is clearly written and easy to understand, even because abstract is the most important part. So anybody who want to basically go through your work, basically, give me 1 second. It's an urgent call I need to take. Just give me 1 second. So sorry about that. So the most important thing is that, if your abstract is not good, then nobody is going to read your manuscript. So make sure that you convey the message in a more accurate and more effective manner in the abstract. Then next comes the introduction part. In the introduction, initially, you should be able to talk about the problem. What is the problem in that particular area in which you have worked out? or the research which we have carried out. So talk about the problem. For example, if I talk about the hello. Yeah, please mute yourself. Okay. So first of all, you need to talk about the problem statement, like what kind of research or what kind of project you have carried out. For example, if I talk about the cancer, in the field of cancer, right? So you need to talk about the prevalence of the cancer, how many people are suffering all over the world, or in India or Asia Pacific region. And then you also need to talk about the economic burden on the society with this disease. And then you talk about the limitations, like what are the existing, drugs or the therapies which are there for the treatment of cancer, and what are the challenges associated with those drugs or the therapies. And then you talk about your approach, like how your research will solve that problem or will not suffer from those limitations, which existing drugs or therapies are suffering from. So that will always make up a good introduction. And next comes the methodology part, where you will discuss in detail about the techniques, tools, procedures which you have followed to carry out the research work. You can you also have to talk about the equipments or the materials which you have used. You also need to talk about the sometime catalog number of the materials or the name of the vendors or the companies from which you have procured your materials, and then use the proper notations like including chemical formulas and the symbols that is also required. And sometimes methodology is a very, very important part. If your methodology is not accurate and not in a detailed manner, then if somebody else want to repeat the findings which you have observed in your study, they will never be able to repeat it. For example, if you are synthesizing some molecule by using certain chemical reactions, and if you forget to mention the temperature or the pH, or by mistake you mention the wrong temperature or the wrong pH, then it doesn't matter how much you have worked out or how good is your work, how true your work is. People will never be able to repeat your work, and they will always have a doubt on your research work which you have carried out. Okay, so make sure your methodology is accurate so that people can reproduce the work carried out by you. So next comes the results part, where we'll be talking about the data which you have observed or the findings you have observed. And then again, data is of two types. One is the data of primary importance, which generally comes in the main part of the study, and these are the main and the unexpected findings, basically main findings, basically, right? And the data which is less important, which is not that important, right? To report that kind of data, you can use the supplementary sheet, or you call it supplementary data, or the data for the secondary importance. And it's very important to use the different subheadings to keep the results of same type together and avoid the redundancy. How you are presenting your work, that is very, very important. So if you are categorized, your data in different subheadings, that will be very easy for the reader or the audience to understand what you have carried out. Now, if you look at this figure at the bottom, what you see here basically is the tip of the iceberg. You can just imagine, only 10% of the iceberg is visible to you. More than 90% of the iceberg is below the sea surface. So this tip of the iceberg is most of the time is the data of the primary importance, which becomes a part of the main paper. And sometimes in case of big journals like Nature, Science, Cell, they mostly ask you to put most of the other data of secondary importance as a supplementary data, which is you can see this, the part which is beneath the sea surface. And the next important part of the result section is the representation of your data in the form of figures and tables for getting a better clarity and presenting a data in a more efficient manner. And statistical analysis is another important component of your result and the data analysis. If you don't if you want to compare between two groups, and if you don't use the statistical tools, then you actually don't know whether these two groups are significantly different from each other or not. So statistical analysis is also very, very important. Now, if we talk about the presentation of your data in the form of figures or tables, you can see here on the right hand side, these are some of the pictorial micrographs, and some line data is there, right? So, and there's labels like x-axis labels, y-axis labels, and then there's a caption, legend, right? So all these things are very, very important, and how you're writing it and how you're presenting it becomes very, very important. Anybody who is reading your paper, they should be able to understand your data just by looking at your figures or the pictures. So that means the figures and the picture should be self-explanatory in nature. One doesn't have to go through the detailed results section to understand your data. So that is the art, how to present your data in the form of figures so that it becomes self-explanatory. You should have a caption, legend, which are written, in a descriptive manner. Also, at the same time, you need to make sure that you are not making it very crowded, okay? And then you use the color only when it is necessary. But sometimes color also help you in distinguishing the different groups. If you're having more than 2, 3, or 4 groups in a data set, then the color representation or differentiation becomes very important in terms of making them distinct or easy to understand for the audience. And then sometimes you can also use the symbols as a mark for significance, like star mark or the hashtag mark, to differentiate between the level of significance which you have achieved in your data set. Then your scales, like x-axis scales, the gap between different scales, and then axis level, table size, all these things are very, very important. You need to make sure that they are not too small in size or not too big in size, okay? And then photos, the pictures, like this kind of macrographs, make sure that they do have the scale marking. For example, in this case, it is 500 nanometer. So this kind of scale markings are very, very important, and make sure that the pictures are not manipulated. These days, if you look at most of the retractions which are happening all over the world, not only in India, they are mostly because of problems in the pictorial data. Like some of the images which are generated by using some instruments like scanning electron microscope or TEM or histopathology data or immunohistochemistry data, where certain kind of macrographs are involved. Because sometimes people, intentionally, but sometimes it is unintentional as well, that unknowingly they use the same kind of figures, to represent the different kind of data. So as a researcher, it is our responsibility to understand, what we are putting in our manuscript is not manipulative in nature, and it should give the clear picture of what we have observed. Now, if you have to present your data in the form of table, you need to understand when a particular kind of data set requires a table and when it doesn't need a table. If you just look on the right hand side, which is about the effect of aeration on growth of Streptomyces collicola, right? So if you look at this, table, so you can see on one side there's a temperature, right, which is mentioned as temperature, in degrees Celsius, and then number of experiments, right? And then they mention whether aeration was present or absent. So, and then the growth observed. So here they mention growth 70, here it is 0. So this data is a very simple data, which is a comparison between the two groups which are exposed to same temperature, same number of experiment, but in one experiment aeration was provided, in one experiment aeration was not provided. So the cells, the the growth was 0, where this aeration was not provided. On the other hand, it was 78%. So this kind of data is a very simple data. You can simply write down it in a form of sentence, like growth medium aeration was essential for the growth of this microorganism as follicular, and at room temperature in stationary culture, the bacterial growth was not measurable, whereas in aerated culture, substantial growth was evident. So this kind of Data set doesn't need a table actually. It just can be written in the form of paragraph, one paragraph simply. But if you look on the left hand side panel, where we are talking about a very complex data set in which we're talking about the inferior frontal gyrus, which is the brain region, one of the brain region, and then we are talking about the coordinates. These are the coordinates in the brain regions, X, Y, and Z coordinates actually, which is like anterior, posterior, medial, lateral, and the ventral tegment, lateral. And then they are talking about the other brain region, like basal amygdala, and then they're talking about medial frontal gyrus, and then cortex, and then hippocampus, then cerebellum. So you can see they're talking about the brain activation and then memory performance. So you can just imagine how complicated is this in terms of number of data they have presented in just half of page. Do you think anybody who will go through this paragraph from top to bottom can understand what author is trying to say? It will take at least 5 minutes, one to read all this and then understand what they need to say. So this kind of data, which is very complex, and when a lot of data is involved, this kind of data needs to be presented in a form of table. However, the data which is very simple, very straightforward, it doesn't need to be represented in the form of table. So as a scientist, it is your job to understand how to present your data more clearly by using the tables and the figures. Now, next comes the discussion part. Now, discussion, as we all know, there is more about the interpretation of your results. So whatever finding you have observed, that those findings you are supposed to discuss in the light of relevant literature which is published. So sometimes it might happen that your findings may align with the literature in that particular field, and sometimes it is also possible that your findings may contradict the already published literature. So whatever will be the case, sometimes most of the time what happens, the students mostly what they do, they only try to discuss the findings in light of the positive literature, the literature which is speaking in support of them, and they try to avoid the talking about the literature which is going against their findings. But I always encourage the students, if you really want to make a good manuscript, you need to talk about both the sides, like plus and minus. So if your findings are not aligning with findings from some of the labs, you need to talk about it and then try to highlight the possible reason why your findings are not aligned with their observations. So that will always make a good manuscript and a good food for the thought of scientists who are working in that area. Okay, and then compare the published with your own. That is what we do. And it's most important, as a researcher, you need to avoid the statement that go beyond what the results can support. Sometimes, if I talk about, again, because I'm a scientist working in the field of drug discovery, so I will take the example of that only. So the statements which go beyond, for example, if I screen one molecule for the treatment of diabetes, I cannot tell that, okay, this molecule A is treating the diabetes, because that is just one study, and based on the finding observed in one study, that too preclinical or animal models, or just on like one of the clinical trials in humans, I cannot claim that this molecule can definitely treat the diabetes or cancer or not. So the statement should be very modest, like, okay, drug A may, based on the findings, we can suggest that drug A may treat the diabetes or cancer. So you should avoid making the tall claims, and never use the non-specific expressions. And the new terms which are not already defined or mentioned in your paper before in the introduction or methodology, those terms we avoid using in the discussion part. And also speculations on possible interpretation that are not rooted in the facts. That is also very, very important. So talk scientifically, talk factually, talk based on the evidence which you have gathered, or based on the evidence which others have presented in their manuscript. Don't talk hypothetically always, right? And then the next part of the manuscript is the conclusion part. So conclusion is generally a very, I would say, not very lengthy part. It's just one paragraph, and in this part you are not supposed to discuss about the findings. You are not supposed to talk about the results. And most importantly, in the conclusion, you should talk about how your work advances the present state of the knowledge. So whatever data, whatever evidences you have collected, how those evidences are advancing the current state of knowledge in that particular field. And you should also talk about the uses, extension, or future applications of your work, so that other scientists, who are working in your area, they can take the lead from your work. And you can also suggest some future experiments for others and for your junior colleagues. You have to be very, very clear, so that you help the reviewers and the editors to judge your work and its impact. So if your conclusion is to the point and meaningful, the reviewers will be able to make a meaningful judgment based on that. And next part of the manuscript is the acknowledgement section. Now this is again the most important part. Why people generally don't give much attention to this part? They generally acknowledge their institute, they generally acknowledge their department, and they acknowledge the funding agencies from where they receive the funds. And sometimes they don't understand that in the acknowledgement section, the name of the people also comes. But students or the new researchers, sometimes senior researchers as well, they don't understand, like who are the people who should come in the authorship as the author, or who are the people who should come in the acknowledgement section. Sometimes you are using the facility in some of the lab, and then maybe that person is asking you to put his name in the authorship section, but that is not ethical, right? Because you are just using a facility. So their name can come in the acknowledgement section, but not in the authorship section. Okay. Also, if somebody is helping you in proofreading the manuscript, give me 1 second. I will take a 2 minutes of break for a cup of water, and then I will get back to you. Hello. I hope everyone is here.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sorry for the delay from my side. There was some urgency which I had to attend. So, no one. Okay. So I was talking about, the acknowledgement section in the manuscript. So acknowledgement, it's very important to understand, whom to keep and whom not to keep. So most of the time we do the mistakes of putting the name of, people in authorship whose name is supposed to come in the acknowledgement section. कई बार ऐसा होता है कि हमने किसी की लैब की फैसिलिटी यूज की, हमने किसी का इक्विपमेंट यूज किया, या फिर हो सकता है कि आपकी मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट को किसी ने रीड किया हो, राइट, इन टर्म्स ऑफ प्रूफ रीडिंग, फाइंडिंग सम ग्रामेटिकल एरर्स और टेक्निकल एरर्स. सो हमें एज ए रिसर्चर ये समझने की जरूरत है कि उन लोगों का नाम कभी भी ऑथरशिप में नहीं आता है, हमेशा एक्नॉलेजमेंट में आता है. और कई बार ऐसा हो सकता है कि जो लोग आपको अपनी फैसिलिटी अवेल करवाएं लैब की, जैसे कि आप आइए हमारी लैब में इक्विपमेंट यूज किए और साथ में ऑथरशिप दे दीजिए, राइट, उस टाइप की चीजें मैं देखता हूँ चलती हैं बहुत ज्यादा, कई जगह पे चलती हैं. बट if you are that kind of researcher, then you can be in trouble in any time, because when you are taking the authorship in any of the paper without understanding what work has been done by and by whom, then that means you are taking the ownership of that work. आप उस काम की ओनरशिप ले रहे हैं अगर आपका नाम उस पेपर में. इसलिए मेरे पास जितने भी लोग यहाँ पे काम करने आते हैं हमारी लैब में, IIT BHU में, we always say that okay, this lab is open to everybody. Anybody can come and work and utilize the facility of the lab, but we will not take the authorship until and unless we are collaborating scientifically on that project. अगर मान लीजिए हम scientifically collaborate कर रहे हैं, हम प्रोजेक्ट को इनिशियल स्टेज से अपना आइडियाज दे रहे हैं, थॉट्स दे रहे हैं, साथ में डिस्कस कर रहे हैं, फिर कुछ एक्सपेरिमेंट उनकी लैब में हो रहे हैं, कुछ एक्सपेरिमेंट हम लोग कर रहे हैं, इन दैट केस इट इज अ साइंटिफिक कोलैबोरेशन. देन we know about the data, we know about the quality of the data, the authenticity of the data, then there is nothing wrong in taking the authorship. But when somebody is coming in my lab, utilizing the equipment in my lab, doing some experiment, and then generating the data, I don't know about their study, I don't know what the concept, I'm just providing some instruments, some facilities, that's all. So in that case, if I'm taking the authorship and if some of that data अगर भविष्य में कभी रिट्रैक्ट हो जाता हो पेपर, उस डेटा पे कोई क्वेश्चन मार्क अगर आते हैं, तो साथ में आपकी जो शाख है वो भी मतलब ताक पे है, कहने का मतलब ये है. तो पेपर अगर रिट्रैक्ट होता है तो बिकॉज आप उसमें ऑथरशिप है आपकी, आप भी उसका पार्ट है, तो आप भी इक्वली ट्रबल में आएंगे जितना कि प्राइमरी लैब आएगी, उनके कॉरस्पॉन्डिंग ऑथर या फर्स्ट ऑथर आएंगे. तो इसीलिए इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड when to get involved as an author and when not. At the same time, you can put the name of those people, or you can ask those people to put your name in the acknowledgement section. Okay, you have utilized the facility of my lab, so you put my name in the acknowledgement section. Okay. Apart from that, so these people can be called as advisor, providing some advice, some support, financial support like funding agency, DST, SERB, ICMA, DBT, or if you are taking funding from NIH, you can put the name of National Institute of Health USA. Then proofreaders, जिन्होंने आपके मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट को प्रूफरीड किया है, या फिर टाइपिस्ट की बात करें, या फिर सप्लायर जिन्होंने आपको कोई गिफ्ट सैंपल दिया है. फॉर एग्जांपल, आप कोई ड्रग टेस्ट कर रहे हैं, आपके पास नहीं है, आपने किसी कंपनी को लिखा कि आपको गिफ्ट सैंपल चाहिए, उन्होंने प्रोवाइड किया है और वो गिफ्ट सैंपल से आप टेस्टिंग कर रहे हैं, तो उन सप्लायर का नाम भी आप एक्नॉलेजमेंट सेक्शन में डाल सकते हैं. आई होप ये क्लियर होगा सभी को. ओके. Now the next part, or another important part of the manuscript section, is the reference section, and this is a part where people do most of the mistakes, and most of the journals, they are struggling with this problem, because most mistakes are found in the references than any other part of the manuscript. It is one of the most annoying problems, and it causes the great headache among the editors. So now, as a scientist, as a researcher, it is very important to understand what kind of references you should include and how you should include. So the most important thing is that you should only include, or you should only cite the references or the publications on which your work is based. That means the work which is directly related to your project. Only those references should be cited in your manuscript. Apart from that, always make sure that do not inflate the manuscript with too many references. What does it mean? आप कभी भी अपनी मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट में अगर बहुत ज्यादा रेफरेंसेस डाल देंगे तो आपकी मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट का वेटेज कम हो जाएगा, बिकॉज ऐसा नहीं कि आपने 200 रेफरेंसेस डाल दिए, 400 डाल दिए तो पीपल आर गोइंग टू अप्रिशिएट योर वर्क. नो, इफ इट इज अ रिसर्च मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट, अगर रिसर्च मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट है तो नोबडी विल अप्रिशिएट मोर देन 50 और 60 रेफरेंसेस. 50 से 60 रेफरेंस बहुत है उसमें, उससे ज्यादा नहीं, क्योंकि दैट इज द मेन work which you are referring to carry out your work. Okay, and another important point which you should make sure that never ever try to make the excessive self-citation. That is the biggest issue in scientific world right now. Everybody is running in a rat race where everybody want to have the maximum number of citation. सबको H index अपना high चाहिए, सभी को हजारों में citation चाहिए, and they will not care for the practices they are following to lead in that rat race. But वो rat race ठीक नहीं है. उसमें से एक problem है self citation. So it is very understood that if you are doing some work in particular area, then definitely your work must be based on some of your previous experiments or previous publication. तो वहां पे आप कुछ तो citation देंगे, self citation देंगे, क्योंकि आप उसी एरिया में काम कर रहे हैं 5 साल 10 साल 20 साल से. But if you are giving lot of self citation, so then it is very very clear cut that you are doing the negative thing. So you should never cite more than 10 self references in your paper. Okay, and also avoid excessive citation or publication from the same region. That means you're not supposed to cite articles which are solely from India or solely from America. You should try to make a geographical balance when citing the publications. Now the next important part comes, which is submitting your paper. Okay, now through this cartoon I want to share with you, right? You can just see this is the lead author, the researcher, the student who is writing, who has carried out the work, and she has written her manuscript, and then she's sending her manuscript to her supervisor again and again, and every time she is getting it back, like revising again and again. So at the end, if the supervisor is really giving the time for manuscript reading, finally, they will be able to do the collective corrections, which should be make the manuscript ready to submit in a journal. So before you submit your manuscript, the first important part is the cover letter of your manuscript. So cover letter, is nothing. It's just like a job application letter. Because you want to sell your work, right? And if you want to sell your work, that means you need to present it nicely. So here, most important thing is that do not summarize your manuscript or repeat the abstract. Okay, and again, because this is something which you have already done in the manuscript in the result section or the discussion section, right? Here you are supposed to talk about how your work is important to that journal. Okay, so that you are supposed to mention in that cover letter. And also you can mention, if you do not wish your manuscript to be reviewed by certain reviewers due to any conflict of interest, that also you can mention here. हालांकि ये बात सही है कि editors will never reject your manuscript because of the poor cover letter. कि cover letter आपने खराब लिखा है तो reject तो नहीं करेगा, लेकिन हाँ अगर आपने cover letter अच्छा लिखा है तो उससे आपका editorial process जो है वो थोड़ा सा improve हो सकता है. So you always try to write a better cover letter, which is representing your manuscript in a more better way. Conflict of interest. Again, people don't pay much attention to this part, but this is again very, very important. Conflict of interest can be direct, sometimes, because of employment, somebody is employee, and then he is doing some work and publishing something, sometimes because of the grants which have been awarded, by someone, or the patents, or sometimes it can be a indirect, financial conflict of interest as well. Like you are receiving some honorarium from some company, from some firms, and then you are publishing something in their favor. So these kind of things are not ethical. So if you are having some conflict of interest, so genuinely you are supposed to disclose this in this section of the manuscript. You can tell that, okay, you have carried out this consultancy and you have taken an honorarium, something like that. So you have to mention, yeah. And then career, intellectual, promotion, rivalry, institutional, personal belief. A lot of factors are there, which can play a very, very important role in the conflict of interest. Now, once you are done writing your manuscript, then the next part comes the peer review and responding to reviewer. Because once you have submitted your manuscript, then it will go for the peer review process by the reviewers. Now, what you see in this cartoon, this is you as a scientist, as a researcher who want to publish the manuscript in a journal. And बाकी लोग कौन है जो यहाँ पे खड़े हैं? They are not your enemies actually. These are the editors, these are the reviewers. And if you pass all these phases, then finally your paper will be accepted. So these people are not bad actually. They don't want to hurt you basically, but their job is to make sure that your manuscript should reach to the acceptance phase only after the desired improvement and if it has that quality. Okay. So this is known as the whole peer review process, which goes through the editor-in-chief to associate editor, followed by screening the manuscript by reviewers, then addressing the comments by the reviewers. That's how you call it peer review process. So this is how it starts. As an author, आप क्या करते हैं? अपने manuscript को submit करते हैं, and then if your manuscript is meeting the basic requirement, what editor will do? Editor will assign your manuscript to the reviewers. वो reviewer को दे देंगे आपकी manuscript, right? And then अगर आपकी manuscript basic requirement meet नहीं कर रही है, तो what editor will do? It will reject your manuscript, and then they will ask you to basically write it again or include some more things, right? And after your manuscript is assigned to the reviewers, then what reviewer will do? They will go through your manuscript and they will provide a detailed feedback on the work which you have carried out. They will raise some comments, some suggestions, some queries, and then the job of the editor is to collect those comments from different reviewers. Most of the time it is 2 reviewers, but in some journals it can be 3 or 4 reviewers as well who are taking care of this. And then they will, based on the reviewer comments, they will take a decision. The decision can be rejection if reviewers has advised against your publication that this work is not of high quality or does not meet the journal requirement. They may reject it, or sometimes they can send it for a revision, like major revision or minor revision. And then if you are able to revise the manuscript, you are able to address to the reviewer comment, you will submit it again, then same process, and then the editor, if you have addressed the reviewer's comment adequately, sometimes the editor can take a choice, can make a decision by himself to accept your paper. So this whole process generally takes 2 to 3 months of time, sometimes more than that. Some journals can do it really fast, but it takes at least 2 to 3 months. Then if I'm a reviewer, what I'm looking in your manuscript, I'm always looking for novelty and at the same time technical quality in your work. If your manuscript is high in both in terms of novelty and the technical quality, then that kind of work can be easily accepted. But if your manuscript is poor in both the things, novelty is poor, technical quality is poor, that manuscript has very little chance to get accepted. But if any of these is high or low, then the chances are 50-50. It may or may not be accepted. Okay. So as a reviewer, they are looking for the originality, novelty, and whether you have used the right methodology and whether your findings are making some clear progression in that particular field or not, and whether they are well presented or not. So based on all the judgment, they will make a final decision. So this is one of the ways to responding to the reviewer comments. So I just cited few of the examples for you. So for example, sometimes the reviewers can be really harsh. Sometimes they can straightforward reject your paper, but most of the time reviewers' job is to improve your manuscript. They want you to improve your work, and they want to give some critical suggestions so that your work can be really improved. So how you're responding to those comments is very, very important. If you don't respond appropriately, then your manuscript can be rejected again. But if you can handle those comments properly, nicely, then the work can be accepted. So अगर यहाँ पे देखेंगे आप तो जो reviewers ने एक comment raise किया है, the method, device, paradigm the authors propose is clearly wrong. So looks like reviewer is very straightforward. Is clear cut saying that whatever methodology or technique you have used is clearly wrong. Now, as a author, you have every right to respond in any way. Now you can write if you feel it is the right way. Yes, we know. We thought we could still get a paper out of it. Sorry. So do you think this is the right way to respond to the reviewer? No, not at all. आप उसको अलग तरीके से आंसर कर सकते हैं. You can write it in a very articulate and beautiful manner. The reviewer raises an interesting concern. However, as the focus of this work is exploratory and not performance-based, validation was not found to be of critical importance to the contribution of the paper. So this is a nicer way of addressing the reviewer concern. Again, these are some of the other examples which I have cited for you here, just to show you how not to respond and how to respond to the reviewer queries. So this is also art one has to learn. So these are some of the review assignments which we have received time to time from different journals. So most of the time, if it is not it doesn't belong to my area, I straightforward reject it. I don't want to review this manuscript. But if it's related to our area, then we accept it for review. So these are some of the examples I want to share with you. These are some of the publications, from our lab, like one we published during my postdoc in Nature Neuroscience, and then a Physiology. There are some of the very good journals in the field of neuroscience. If some of you work in this area, then you might be having an idea. So I would like to end my presentation here, with the thanks to my postdoc supervisor and the students who has helped in carrying on the research, and these are the funding agencies. So I would like to take a break, for like another 5 to 10 minutes before we start with the another presentation where we will be talking about the grant writing basically. So which is another important aspect, as an academician, as a researcher, to understand how we can secure the money so that we can keep the projects running in our lab. So we will take a quick break of around 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll continue with this topic. If you have any questions, feel free to make a note, and then we will discuss at the end of presentation. Yeah, good evening, everyone. I hope all are here. Am I audible?
Good evening, sir. Yes, sir.
Good evening. So now we'll start with another important topic, which is about securing the funding, securing the money for your lab. And this is about the grant writing for researchers. So turning ideas into funded projects. So as a researcher, as a scientist, you must be having so many new ideas in your mind while designing the project. for your master's student, for your PhD students. And most of the times we don't think about converting them into grants, funding. And you never know that, even a small idea, can turn up into a big funding. Initially a funding by a government agency, followed by the big funding by some private organizations, and then it can also lead to some startup companies in near future. So we'll talk about this, So the very first question is, what is a grant? So we talk about India, or we talk about United States, or we talk about Europe, or any other part of the world, grant is something which is to run their projects. So grant is basically a mechanism by which an agency basically awards money to fund a research study or other activity, like some consultancy project, such as or education program, or any service program, or any project, basically, right? So that is like monetary, you can say, the award by which is awarded by certain agencies. Yeah, please mute, madam. Yeah. Okay. So the question is, why start now? If we are sitting here today talking about grant writing, securing funding for your lab, why to start now? Why not tomorrow? So grant writing is an important part of a professional growth strategy. We know that many institutes, including our institute, IIT BHU, they have set up certain guidelines, certain norms, which we have to meet whenever we appear for any promotional interviews. So it is not only publication which we have to, showcase in our CV at the end of the day when we are appearing for the interviews. It is also the grant funding. So these are some of the criteria, which everybody has to meet. But that is not the only thing for which we need the grant. It is also required to carry out your passion, to pursue your area of interest, basically. Yeah, if somebody is not interested in research, they are happy in teaching, then I think for them it is not a problem. They can keep on teaching and don't worry about securing the funding. But if we talk about the other institutes, like, the CSI labs or other labs which are purely research in nature, in their cases, they don't have a choice because they don't have any teaching programs. So they are majorly, or they are fully dependent on their research programs. So they have to do research, whether they like it or they don't like it. And they have the funding, they have their own funding from their own parent agencies like CSIR, they have funding from CSIR. And then if we talk about NIPAs are partly educational and partly research institute. So they have funding from Ministry of Chemical and Fertilizers. Similarly, IITs also have major funding from Ministry of Education. So, okay. So, so it helps you to build your individual credentials, right? As a researcher, as a scientist, if you have funding, if you have track record of securing grant, then you will have name in your field. Okay, this person, is a well-known scientist and can secure the funding and can do the good research. So this will help you to build a track record of funding. And they can also...
Sorry. Hello?
Yes.
Sir, PPT is not visible.
Okay. Can we... So is it not visible to everybody? Hello? Let me share again. Okay. Is it visible to you now, madam?
Yes, sir. Visible, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So yeah. So if we talk about the benefits of securing the money, the grant, you can build a track record of funding. You can build your own credentials. You can work with the teams of more experienced researchers around you, and you can also develop a plan for long-range personal development. And most importantly, you can carry out the work in your area of research where you have passion to contribute or develop something. Now, why apply for a grant? Some of the reasons I already discussed with you. But apart from that, by applying for the grant, you will be able to advance the scientific knowledge in your field and also advance your professional career. At the same time, you mean that you will be acknowledged, in that particular field. Okay. And then it means the enhanced prestige also for your institution. So these days, that NIF ranking is one of the important criteria for most of the institutes, including national labs, national institutes also including IITs. So if your institute is able to grab more funding, your faculty members are able to grab more funding to your institute, that will help you to gain more prestige, more ranking, and then it also helps to improve the financial health of your department, school or agency. So some consultancy project, people also get their shares. And if I talk about not in India, the things are a little different, because in government setup, the salaries of those things are mostly supported by the government. But if I talk about United States, I worked there for 4.5 years before coming back to India. There, the salaries, the PI salary, the supervisor salary, वो भी आपकी NIH की जो उसकी ग्रांट होती है उसी से आती है. तो जिस फंडिंग से वो खुद की सैलरी को सपोर्ट करते हैं, उसी फंडिंग से अपने पोस्ट डॉक को, PhD स्टूडेंट को भी सैलरी देते हैं. और उनका जो एक शेयर होता है ओवरहेड का, उससे डिपार्टमेंट के जो बाकी एम्प्लॉइज होते हैं, जो मैनेजर लेवल के लोग होते हैं, उनको भी सैलरी जाता है. ऑफिस को जो सपोर्ट मिलता है बाकी स्टाफ को, वो भी उसी फंडिंग से मिलता है. So that's why, if particular institute has a good funding, then it will help the financial health of the department as well. And grant means definitely new opportunities for your research assistant as well. अगर आपके पास money है, पैसा है, funding है, तो आप अच्छे से अच्छा project कर सकते हैं. You can buy big equipment, advanced technologies, and then you can do the research of your interest. And you can also move forward in the new program that otherwise can be too expensive for your institution to support and implement. So overall, if you look into different components, I think grant funding becomes very, very important these days. More planning is required. Learn about your institution. You need to understand what are the policies, which are there in the proposal development, and whether it will help you to expedite the process, prepare a budget, and complete the application. Now, again, if I talk about India versus United States, there's a lot of difference in terms of, like how you prepare your application, grant application, and then how you submit it. अगर हम इंडिया की बात करें तो यहाँ पे सारा प्रोसेस हमें खुद करना पड़ता है. हमें खुद ही preliminary experiment करने होते हैं. Then we have to generate some pilot data, and then we have to start writing our grant proposal, and then we have to propose a budget, and then prepare documentation, endorsement, all those things, and then submit the application by ourselves. अगर हम यूएस की बात करें तो यूएस में कॉन्सेप्ट थोड़ा सा अलग है. यूएस में आप साइंटिस्ट हैं, आप रिसर्चर हैं, तो आपका जॉब मेनली जो है वो साइंस करना है, रिसर्च करना है. एंड ग्रांट राइटिंग, यू कैन जस्ट राइट अ प्रिलिमिनरी ड्राफ्ट ऑफ योर ग्रांट, एंड देन दैट ड्राफ्ट यू कैन हैंड ओवर टू द ग्रांट मैनेजर. तो वहां पे ग्रांट मैनेजर होते हैं जो आपकी ग्रांट को मैनेज करते हैं. दे विल हेल्प यू टू प्रूफ रीड और to enrich your grant proposal, and then budget they will prepare after discussing with you, and then it is their job to arrange all the paperwork, जैसे endorsement certificate है, declaration है, जो भी supporting documents grant submission में लगते हैं, ये grant manager का काम होता है उनको arrange करना, department से, institute से, जो भी signature लेना है, everything, and they will be only taking your signature on all the required documents and submitting the grant on your behalf. I submitted one grant when I was doing my postdoc. That was a career development grant. So I was surprised to see that the process is so smooth outside. So in India, this concept is still new. DBT follows this kind of practice in some of their to some extent, like welcome trust application or intermediate fellowship, all those things. DBT is following. They have their grant managers. But otherwise in India, most of the things we have to do ourselves. So that has their both pros and cons. So अगर आपकी रिसर्च में ह्यूमन सब्जेक्ट्स इन्वॉल्व हैं, so in that case आपको एथिकल कमेटी का अप्रूवल भी लेना होता है, या इंस्टीट्यूशन रिव्यू बोर्ड का भी आपको अप्रूवल लेना होता है. So अगर आपके रिसर्च में एनिमल स्टडीज इन्वॉल्व हैं, जैसे कि हम लोग ड्रग डिस्कवरी करते हैं, तो वहाँ पे we do lot of preclinical studies where we test different molecules, different formulations in different like animal models. So there we have to check their effects on the animal models. So in that case, we need to have a permission from the institutional animal ethics committee. Now the next important question is how to search for the grant and how to find out which kind of grant we can apply. So it is very important to understand the funding agencies which are funding the kind of research you are doing. How do you align your research based on the funding available in your country? So you can search for the grant through various funding agency sites like Indian Council of Medical Research if your work is related to the medical sciences or health, or you can go to SERP, which is another major funding agency. Now it is being transformed to ANRF, Anusandhan National Research Foundation. So I hope CRG funding will get open soon in a couple of months. And then DBT, Department of Biotechnology, if your work is related to health, biosciences, all those things, and Department of Atomic Energy and Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers. So a lot of agencies are there which are there to support the different kind of projects, different kind of research. So you need to know what kind of research you are doing and which kind of funding agency can support that kind of work. And then go to their web page and see their deadlines and their application format and the requirement you need to meet. And एक बार आपने grant identify कर ली, आप requirement पढ़ लीजिए, instruction पढ़ लीजिए, and based on the instruction you can prepare your grant proposal. Then when it comes to writing the grant, you need to understand that grant लिखना और publication लिखना दोनों बिल्कुल अलग-अलग चीजें हैं. Definitely दोनों को लिखने के लिए आपकी writing skills बहुत अच्छी होनी चाहिए, और अगर नहीं है तो over a period of time आपको develop करना पड़ेगा. How to write a nice grant, because in India we mostly use the English language, so you need to have a good command on the English if you want to write a good grant proposal. But one thing is for sure, that you need to make a habit of writing again and again. And writing is not an overnight job. It takes a lot of time, and you need to work on a schedule. Considering in India, हमारे पास as a teacher, as a professor, बहुत सारी responsibilities होती हैं apart other than research. कई बार हम कई सारे कमिटीज में होते हैं, कई बार टॉक्स में बिजी हैं, कई बार सेमिनार्स में बिजी हैं, कई बार कोई और जॉब्स असाइन हो जाती हैं टाइम टू टाइम. तो you need to make sure that you find enough time if you really want to get the funding for your lab. So plan at least 6 months ahead. अगर कोई एप्लीकेशन डेडलाइन 6 महीने बाद की, तो आप उसको 6 महीने पहले स्टार्ट कर दीजिए. अगर आप सोचेंगे 1 महीने पहले मैं लिखना स्टार्ट करूंगा, तो chances of getting success is very less. And always remember, a well written proposal should be very clear, focused and precise. And if your proposal is poorly written, then it has the potential to limit the chances of having a competitive idea funded. ऐसा हो सकता है कि your idea is great, it is completely novel, you are proposing something which is of high potential in terms of idea, but if you are not able to pen it down nicely in a layman language in the form of grant, the chances of getting it funded will be little less. So these are some of the tips for the grant writing whenever you are starting for as a like initiating the grant writing proposal. First you have to follow an outline. In the outline you can start preparing some of the figures or tables, or you can start drawing some images before you even start writing your proposal. So whatever ideas are coming in your mind, आप एक पेन और पेपर लेके बैठ जाइए और आप उनको पेपर पे लिखना चालू कर दीजिए. पेपर पे फिगर की फॉर्म में, टेबल की फॉर्म में, इमेजेस की फॉर्म में, जो भी आइडियाज दिमाग में आपके आ रहे हैं, you start drawing it on your paper. Try to make sure that you are clear and consistent. And when you have started writing a proposal, make sure that you are using the right terminology, right words, and try to use the sentences which are not very long and not too short. बहुत लंबे अगर सेंटेंस लिखेंगे तो जो भी आपके ग्रांट प्रपोजल को पढ़ेगा या मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट को पढ़ेगा वो लॉस्ट हो जाएगा. तो बहुत लॉन्ग सेंटेंसेस दे आर नेवर अप्रिशिएटेड. ऑल्सो इफ योर सेंटेंस इज टू शॉर्ट, like just maybe 6 words or 7 words, 8 words, that also doesn't convey the meaning effectively. So the sentences, ideal sentence should have a word limit of between 17 to 23. So if it is too short, then also you won't be able to convey the message. If it is too long, the message will be lost in between. And paragraph should be very clear and informative. And you need to understand when to avoid the highly technical language. Always remember that your grant is not necessarily to be reviewed by the expert in your area. You might be working in the field of neuroscience or pain or diabetes, but the person who might be reviewing your grant may be working in a completely different area of biotechnology. So he may not be aware of your technical terms. So you need to make sure that you can avoid the technical terms, at least in some parts of the grant proposal. Now, whenever you are writing your grant proposal, make sure that your grant proposal is the hypothesis driven. That means whenever you are designing any project for your master and PhD student, that also has a hypothesis. That means you are having some problem statement, and then you are proposing that, okay, this problem can be solved out by adopting this particular strategy, and it may or may not work. So based on that hypothesis, if you have some preliminary data in your hand, that will be very, very helpful to secure the funding. These days, getting grant is very, very challenging. It's very competitive. So अगर आपके पास preliminary data नहीं है, the chances of acquiring the grant, as a PI is very difficult. As a student, तो फिर भी these kind of some proposals are funded because they understand that students may not have a preliminary data in their proposal. But a scientist, a professor, is supposed to have some pilot data, because this pilot data is very, very important in terms of giving the confidence to the reviewers. Okay, that means this hypothesis is going in the right direction, or whatever we are proposing may work. So pilot data is very, very important in that way, and it has to be very concise and focused. If you are proposing too many objectives, and if the proposal is too ambitious, then the chances of rejections are very high. One time I did this mistake. I submitted my proposal in DBT. 2 years back, it was reviewed by DBT. And I was also one of the task force member because I work in the field of pain. And I was hoping that, because there are very few people who work in the field of pain research in India, I was very confident about my grant. But unfortunately, in the final round, it was rejected. Although I was not part of reviewing my proposal, because due to conflict of interest, it was rejected. And the reason which was given is that the proposal is over ambitious. And later on, I realized that I tried to propose and I tried to achieve too much in the 3 years of duration. So if your proposals are basically, full with a lot of objectives, then it becomes too ambitious. So you can break it into 2 different grant proposals, or first you carry out one part of it. Can you please mute? Yeah, please mute yourself. Yeah, okay. So yeah, so spend most effort, whenever you are proposing your grant proposal, restate your hypothesis, present a rationale, for carrying out that project, and then propose a research plan, how you will carry out this, and then methodology is also important, how you will attain those objectives, how will you fulfill those objectives, and then you should also propose a rational plan for the failure, because you see in research, in science, things will never work out, or it is not necessary that they will always work out in a way you assume them, right? So in case a particular experiment doesn't work out in a particular manner, then what is your alternative plan for those experiments or for those, objectives? That must also, that if you are highlighting those part as well in your grant, that indicates that you are ahead of other people, who are in the race of securing the funding. That means you as a scientist, have given a well thought, while designing your studies, the backup plans also. So that will put you ahead, as compared to others. So hypothesis, what is hypothesis? When we are talking about the grant proposal or any project, it is a proposed explanation for a phenomena, basically, right? For example, we are talking about this particular, marker cyst. We say that it regulates the X chromosome inactivation by binding to the X chromosome to be inactivated. So it is very, very important that you have to be specific and focused. Do not just use a technique to address an experimental area without a well-formulated hypothesis. No fishing trips. They don't work. They don't work when you are writing a grant proposal. So your proposal, should be hypothesis driven. Now, what are the different components of the grant proposal? The very first important component is the specific aim. So the first half page of a grant proposal should be on the specific aims and objective which you want to achieve, in which you will be talking about what you want to intend and why. Then the next 1 and 1.5 of page section will go to the background and the significance of the study or the project. We'll be talking about the published information related to your field in support of your hypothesis, or maybe in against of your hypothesis as well. And based on that published report, you will try to highlight the importance of your project, and you will try to highlight the significance of your project, why this project is important, what are the lacunas, what are the gaps, इस एरिया में क्या क्या कभी नहीं हुआ है, क्या क्या नई चीजें की जा सकती हैं, या क्या क्या डेवलपमेंट हो सकते हैं. All those things you are supposed to discuss in the significance part, background and significance part. And then comes the preliminary data part. Preliminary data part is also very, very important, where you'll be talking about one-page section on whatever data you have. आपने जो भी experiment किए हैं lab में, जो भी data आपके पास है, based on your hypothesis, that data you will present, and then you will talk about that data, your findings. So that will actually give the confidence to the reviewers and will provide them opportunity to understand, okay, this hypothesis actually works. Later on, all the objectives will be met or not, that nobody knows. But actually, hypothesis is going in the right direction and is, evidence-based. So that confidence reviewer will get by looking at your preliminary data, and the chances of funding and their confidence on your proposal will increase. And next comes the experimental plan, where you will be talking almost about 2 to 3 pages about your methodology or your approach by which you are going to solve that problem, or you are going to meet the objectives which you have proposed. Okay? And then if you talk about the specific aims, as I already told you, right, in the objective, so you need to first mention overall hypothesis, okay, then give enough background, and then spell out the specific aims of your proposal. At least 2 to 4 aims, right? Sometimes people like to give the sub aims as well, like aim 1, aim 2, aim 3, and then aim 1 also they sometimes try to give the sub aims like aim 1A, 1B, aim 2A, 2B, aim 3A, 3B, or 3C, like something like that. So that indicates that, okay, you're very, very clear about what questions you are asking and how you will do that. Okay. Then in the background, I already told you, if you give a good overview of the field, then that will talk about your brilliance and knowledge in that particular field and command as a scientist in that particular area. Okay. And you should be able to highlight the gaps in the knowledge, as I told you before. So those gaps, limitations, or what you can do, add in the current field of knowledge that you are supposed to fill in the background section. And this will set up the stage for the whole grant. Background is very, very important. We are going to talk about the significance as well. What is the significance of your project? Why this project is important? And preliminary data, I already told you, most of the time, or not always, it is possible to have the preliminary data. But if you have the preliminary data, it is going to help you a lot. It will tell that the technique has worked for a related project, and data that show that the hypothesis is sound. So that will give the confidence to the reviewer, that this actually works. So what are you really going to do actually? This section is the heart of the grant application. Like what actually, as a scientist, as a researcher, you are going to do in this project. But many people, what happens, they spend so much time on the background and the preliminary data. वो उसमें ही इतना ज़्यादा समय दे देते हैं background में, preliminary data में, कि by the time they come to the middle part of the grant application, where you are supposed to talk about आप क्या करेंगे basically, how you are going to solve out this problem, they run out of steam and they don't write it very effectively. And this is where most of the people, they fail actually. So in this, as I mentioned, you talk about you again restate a specific aim, what you have proposed in the beginning, okay? And then you again restate the hypothesis for the specific aim, because here you are going to talk about each specific aim, their sub-aim, and what you have hypothesized in that. And then you are also going to talk about the rationale for the specific aim, like what is the scientific rationale. And then you also talk about the detailed plan for the experiment, like how you are going to address those questions which you have asked in some specific aim. And then you are also going to talk about the expected outcome, like what do you think? Okay, what are you expecting out of this experiment? Whether, what kind of results you are expecting. And then you're also supposed to talk about the alternative plan. So plan B, if the selected approach fails. So as I told you in the beginning, this will put you ahead of your peers in competition. So this person knows better. This person has a complete knowledge. Okay, if this will not work out, this is how he is going to deal with this problem. So ये बहुत जरूरी है. इससे आप बाकी लोगों से आगे निकल जाएंगे. Now the most important thing, whenever you want to apply for the funding, what one must look for. It doesn't matter how good you are a scientist, how good is your idea. If your proposal is also, doesn't matter how good it is well written. Idea बहुत अच्छा है, बहुत बड़े साइंटिस्ट हैं, आपका प्रपोजल बहुत अच्छा लिखा हुआ है, बट अगेन अगर आपका जो रिसर्च एरिया है वो फंडिंग एजेंसी के मैंडेट में ही नहीं है, तो इससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता कि आप क्या है, कौन है, क्या करते हैं. Your proposal is never going to be funded. I can give you in writing. So first you need to look at the areas in which a funding agency is interested, the mandate areas. All the funding agencies, they have indicated their mandate areas in which they fund the proposals. Accordingly, you have to apply for the grant. Okay. You cannot ask dog to climb the tree. That's not possible. In the similar manner, you cannot, write a funding for the health to some agencies, who don't look after it, like ISRO, right? They fund the space research, right? So you cannot write a proposal for space research to DBT. These are two completely, different agencies, and their mandates are different. So you need to understand, the right match for your proposal or the right funding agencies. So these are some of the major government funding agencies and which funds most of the projects in India. DRDO is there. So biotech related research can be funded by DBT or through BIRAC, or DRDO funds most of the research related to the defense. CSIR fund research related to drug discovery or other things as well. Ayurveda, yoga, naturopathy. Then we have Department of Science and Technology, which fund different domains, including, physics, chemistry, and biological sciences as well, including drug discovery. TIFAC is there, SERB is there. Now NRF is there, NRF has replaced this, SERB recently. And ICMR, ISRO, and then some state governments are also there. Like in case of Uttar Pradesh, we have CSTUP, Council of Science and Technology, Uttar Pradesh. They also fund some of the grant proposals. Also, they don't fund too much, but they can give you one manpower and some of the funds to carry out, to generate some pilot data. But not only government funding agency, you can also approach some of the international funding agencies like DBT, Welcome Trust India Alliance. They provide a lot of grants, sometimes in crores. If your proposal is really great, and your idea is really novel, then you can apply for Welcome Trust DBT fellowships. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So they also support a lot of research all over the world. You can approach their webpage also. What kind of research do they fund? And NIH, USA. So they are the major funder जो लोग अमेरिका में रिसर्च करते हैं उनके लिए. Recently, जब से डोनाल्ड ट्रम्प की गवर्नमेंट आई है, there is a major blow to the research in US. They have directed a lot of fundings, especially overhead funding उन्होंने डिटेक्ट किया. So most of the institutes जो अभी US में हैं, they are talking about it, that how we will do the research if cut the overhead funding. So I hope things will be normalized there, pretty soon. But NIH is a major funder, not only for the institutes who are placed in America, but also for the institutes, who work in collaboration with the US institutes. Then there are other programs by the government of India, like Indo-US program by Department of Science and Technology, like Indo-German program, UK, India, Indo-Russia. So a lot of programs are there. You need to look at the websites, and their calls. Time to time open होती रहती हैं, and you need to find a collaborator there. और आप collaborator जो भी आपके एरिया में काम कर रहे हैं, जर्मनी में, रशिया में, यूके में, यूएसए में, आप कांटेक्ट कर सकते हैं उनको, and then आप साथ में मिलके joint proposal propose कर सकते हैं. So if your proposal is really strong and good enough, then it may be funded by the funding agencies. So जो उनकी funding agency है US में, like NSF and I, they will fund their US collaborator. और इंडिया में हमको कौन फंड करेगा? DST, Department of Science and Technology. This is how this model works. Apart from that, you can also apply for some other, US foundations and some philanthropic fundings is there. In US and other countries, there's a lot of philanthropic funding, like people, donate a lot there. Sometimes their dear ones are suffering from some life-threatening disease or somebody else that's passed away. So sometimes they donate their whole property, for the research in some specific area. So a lot of philanthropic funding is there in other countries. And in India also it is, maybe I hope in coming days it will increase. Then CSR funding is another option which you can tap, which is corporate social responsibility. So according to Government of India mandate, all the industries, they have to give one part of their, share, as a corporate social responsibility to carry out the some, scientific or social responsibility. So that also you can tap, for your research. You can get in touch with some of the industry. They can support to their CSR funding. Some large corporations are also there, like some private sector, some industries also you can tap, they also support the research if they're interested in your work. So these are some of the, investors you can see. So if they're working in your area, so sometimes they will be happy to fund your research. So if you ask me the question, what are the types of projects, which will receive the funding? Are these the projects of high scientific caliber or what kind of projects? So the most important, answer is that uniqueness, the novelty basically. By law, the funding agency cannot support a project twice, or it cannot support a project which is already funded or paid for research, which has already been done. So your project has to be highly novel, highly unique, and it should be of a caliber of high scientific. Then only you can expect your project to be funded by any of the agencies. These days, securing funding is not easy. The project has to be really, really good, and at the same time, you should have the expertise to or capability to carry out that project, which will be evident from your CV. And competition will always be high. As I told you, funding agencies, they receive thousands of applications for one single, I would say, grant call. And sometimes it is very difficult to hit the funding in one attempt, first attempt, but it is not impossible. So even the best idea will not be funded until it matches the interest of funding agency. Always remember that, the competitive ideas, it must reflect both contemporary thought in a field and the interest of the agency. So as I told you in the beginning, if your research is not matching with the mandate of the funding agencies, what they do, what they appreciate, and doesn't matter how good is your proposal, how great you are as a scientist, that proposal has minimal chances to get funded. These are some of the projects which has been funded, to our lab time to time. This was one of the recent grant which has been funded, to IIT BHU, with one of my other colleague, and then this is the another grant from ICMAR in collaboration with NIT Allahabad. And then, as I told you, there are some state-funded projects as well, like CSTUP. So although they do not fund a lot of money, they just funded us like around 7.8 lakh, So, but this fund is good enough to carry out the pilot experiment or generate some preliminary data for the big proposal. So you can use this state government funding to generate, to work on some, big ideas, but on a pilot level. And once you have that pilot data, you can apply, you can use that data for applying, for a bigger grant with DBT, ICM, or other funding agencies. These are some of the other funding agencies, funding, which we have received time to time from the different funding agencies. So recently, one funding I forget to mention here, we just received a sanction letter, day before yesterday from Indian Council of Medical Research. So that project is on role of gut microbiota, and development of novel cocktail for the treatment of neuropathic pain. So that is a 82 lakhs, the budget is around 82 lakh. And so that is for 3 years. These are some of the other projects. So this is an international project which has been funded to us in July 2019. So this was a kind of Indo-US project in which our collaborator from Johns Hopkins and University of Washington, St. Louis, they have visited IIT BHU. And our students also get the opportunity to visit their lab in the exchange program through this grant. So this kind of grants are also there, in which you have the opportunity, your collaborator has the opportunity to visit to your lab, and your students can also go and visit their lab. So this is some of the project, like previous project, And this was all about the government funded project. But as I mentioned, you can also tap the consultancy project from the industries, because we work in the area of drug discovery. A lot of pharmaceutical industries, they are in need of, screening their molecules for safety and efficacy studies. They keep on contacting us time to time for the, drug development projects. So we do consultancy as well, a lot of consultancy as well for the industries. So this is US based consultancy actually. So that's all from my side today. And I would like to end my presentation with a brief quote that anyone who stops learning is old, or whether at 20 or 80, but anyone who keeps learning, they always stays young. So you should never stop learning, if you don't want to grow old. Thank you so much for your patience and for listening to me for this, like 2.5 and 3 hours. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer. And if any one of you is planning to visit Varanasi, in near future, feel free to visit our lab at Department of Pharmaceutical Engineering and Technology. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions if you have. Or yeah, I'm writing my email ID in the chat box. You can, also email me your queries and question if you want. Okay. So, okay, there is one question by Abida Anand, right, regarding like how one can publish paper if unable to pay the APC charges. That is a very important, point which has been raised by Abida Anand. Nowadays, I know most of you might have heard about the open access journals, right? So many journals, are becoming open access these days. What do you mean by open access? That means, if you want to publish your manuscript, then you have to pay to the journal to publish your work, right? And sometimes these charges are not nominal charges. They are not like 5,000, 10,000 or 50,000. These are very huge charges. Sometimes they are in lakhs. And unfortunately, in our country, our funding agencies don't have any provision to support for the publication charges. But in other countries like US or Europe, they do have this model. In the grant, funding only, they have the one column for the publication charges as well, where you can ask in grant only, and then you can pay for the publication charges. But in India, so far, this model is not in existence. But yeah, as a scientist, I can talk about myself, whenever I do my research, I never communicate in the open access journal. I always try to go for the journals which work on the subscription mode. That means if I have to publish, I don't have to pay anything to the journal. So the audience, the readers, if they want to access our journal, they have to pay for that, because we don't have that support from our institute as well. And that will be, a lot of burden on the institute as well. I hope I answered your question, Abida. And yeah, the same question she's asking. Okay. And then there's okay. So Tabassum Jafar has asked a question regarding, it would be helpful for you for postdoc aspirants, shed a light on postdoc. So yeah, if someone of you or some of your students are willing to carry out the postdoc from IIT BHU or from any of the IITs, there are a lot of opportunities are there. So we have one institute postdoc, we call it IPTS, Institute Postdoc Fellowship is also there, which is published time to time along with the PhD advertisement. So one has to look into the IIT BHU website for these opportunities. And apart from that, you can always apply for some of the ICMR, like funded postdoc fellowships, like ICMR RA, Research Associate. So if one has already completed PhD, they can write a project with the supervisor. You can contact the supervisor in your area of research and write a proposal and submit to ICMR, or you can also submit to DST, and SERP also supports in terms of National Postdoctoral Fellowship. So there are a lot of opportunities, which can be explored. For that, you have to contact the supervisors who are working in your area of research. Any other questions? Okay. So thank you so much once again for your patience listening, and feel free to write to me if you have any specific questions. Thank you so much. And I request everyone, to do not forget to fill the feedback form. It is very, very important for all of us to understand. Okay. Chaya Negi, I request you to please mute your. Please mute.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, madam. You have any question?
Yes, sir. I have a question.
Yeah, please ask.
Sir, as you said that about the covering letter. So,
Yes.
sir, it's depending on the particular journal, or it's preparing by itself.
So cover letter is whenever you want to communicate your manuscript to any journal, So along with your manuscript, you have to submit the cover letter as well. So what I told you that whenever you are writing your cover letter, you should write it very concisely. You are not supposed to talk about your results, about your findings in the cover letter. The most important thing journal is looking in your cover letter is how your manuscript, is important for their journal. How you're going to contribute in their domain. So that you are supposed to highlight in the cover letter. So did I answer your question?
Oh, yes, sir. Sir, I have one another question.
Yes.
Sir, what is the difference between systematic review and the meta-analysis?
So systematic review basically, is mostly about, you are picking, for example, you want to write, an article maybe, in a particular field, right? And then, you are compiling the information from different reviews and then, presenting it in a form of kind of, like a review article, right? Like collecting information from different research articles basically, and then writing it, right? Meta-analysis is mostly about, like analyzing the data, like, putting the statistics in that, and then making some conclusion out of that data. For example, if you are writing a meta-analysis review on some, like medical disorder, like maybe epilepsy, right? So in that case, you'll be collecting the data on the patients who are suffering from stroke, like depending upon like whether it is in you are targeting the particular country or globally, and then putting the statistical analysis into that data, and then making your own conclusion and providing the future direction to the researcher where this field can move in the future. So systematic review is purely review article, but meta-analysis is not actually a review article. It is it's a kind of like mix of, you can say, like you are doing some kind of research on the already published data and concluding something, based on the data which is provided by others, and then providing a direction to that field. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience. And then, feel free to write to me if you have any questions. Yeah, thanks.